Joining me right now is Slack's co-founder and CEO, Stuart Butterfield. We're thrilled to have you on this big day. It's not an IPO day, it's a direct listing day, which is a different thing. So just explain what is actually happening so people understand.
All right, I'll do this one pretty briefly. So in a traditional IPO, you have underwriters who commit to buying the shares. They kind of pitch them to a small group of investors. Right. All of that happens in private. Only those shares are available to trade, and the rest are locked up. And that might be 90% are locked up and 10% are traded. In a direct listing, potentially 100% of the shares are tradable, and there's many sellers and there's many buyers, so you should find a market clearing price earlier. The big thing for us was, in a traditional IPO, it's the company that's offering shares. And you might raise, $1 billion or something like that. When you raise $1 billion, you dilute existing shareholders by issuing new shares. So we're not doing that. We're just opening it up before trading.
So there's no money raise.
No.
You have about $800 million in the bank already. So this is unusual because not a lot of companies can actually pull this off as such. But also, you're rewriting the model to some degree. Wall Street, I imagine, did not like this.
Everyone says they like it. We'll see how much I don't know how much they really like it, but I think there's a lot of investors who are used to a model where they get a small allocation, they wanted a big one. In direct listing, at least they have the opportunity. And I think you saw that with Spotify. Some early institutional investors taking huge positions on day one, whereas in a traditional IPO, they might have only got 25 or 50 million.
To the extent there are other companies out there like an Airbnb looking at this to say, does this work? How much are you going to save in fees, Wall Street fees?
The savings aren't that great, to be honest. And that's certainly not the motivator. The big one for us was not having to raise new capital. I think there is, one of the hopes for a company like us is that there's not too much volatility. And we are hoping that this model, where there's many sellers, many buyers, supply and demand, we reach a market clearing price a lot earlier.
One of the other distinctions, though, is there is no lockup. Typically, there's lockup on early investors, sometimes employees. Yep. You can sell shares into this yourself.
I can, although as a Section 16 officer of a public company, I'm not free to just buy and sell.
So you won't be selling into this?
I have some small sales.
And long term, though, the other piece of this is sometimes there's a view that the company will do a listing and then do a secondary, which actually looks like an IPO later.
Yeah. That's certainly possible for us. I think one of the things about being public is it opens up capital markets generally. So not just equity, but debt, converts, all kinds of stuff.
Tell us how this changes the company. Does it change it at all?
No, I mean, it's a big day. It's a nice moment. And I think especially a nice moment for the team to show some appreciation and recognition to one another for all the hard work. For us, we spent the last couple of weeks writing thank you notes to customers and sending them out, so they hopefully would arrive around today. But we're, low single-digit percentage penetrated into what we think is just an enormous market. There's 10 million daily active users, but there's a couple 100 million people whose working lives are mediated by email, and they would all be better off with Slack or something like it. So that's the focus.
Okay, let's talk about the valuation. This is a company, I should say, that still loses money, about $138 million.
Yeah.
Your revenue. You have a huge revenue number, but it's coming down. We were in the 80+% range. Now, in 2020, you're predicting it's going to be closer to 50%.
Yep.
How should investors think about that? How should they think about your valuation?
I'm not going to give them advice on that. We're still in the quiet period, but I would say this. So we in fiscal 2017, 105 million in revenue. 18 was 220. Last year was a little over 400. We guided to 590 to 600 for this year. So those are big numbers, and these are numbers that wouldn't have been private company numbers before. We're getting to be at scale, and so the percentage rate of growth, I think, is you got to balance that with the absolute number of dollars coming in.
What did you think of the reaction both to the IPO of Uber, which we were sitting here, by the way, I think Dara was wearing socks that looked like Slack socks. You have Slack socks
on today.
Slack shoes on, by the way.
These
custom
are
Slack shoes.
Kohan, a nice customer of ours, who's behind us with a bunch of other customers, Molly Moon Ice Cream and Troy Pack Coffee, made these custom for our listing day.
But when you saw the reaction to the Uber IPO, which did not go up but went down, you thought what?
I thought, that's too bad, I guess. I mean, it has nothing to do with us, I don't think. Because investors should be given credit for adjudicating between different companies and looking at them.
Okay, in the enterprise space, then let's talk about Zoom.
Yeah.
Because that was an IPO that zoomed 72% on its first day. Do you look at that as a success or a failure? Because they left a lot of money on the table.
Yeah, that's a tough one to call, because I think now they're notorious, right? They got a lot of great publicity out of that. I think they got some good, warm feelings from people. Investors are excited. But yeah, we're very focused on ourselves. I mean, we have a big job to do. This is a new category of software. There's not a lot of comps for investors to say, like, it's just like this, it's just like that. We have a lot of people to convince, a big story to tell, and I'm not looking so much at what everyone else is doing.
Can we talk, though, about the competition? Because there is a fierce competition going on, and lots of different players, whether you think of Microsoft, which is directly in this space, and Facebook, which wants to be in this space, or is in this space to some degree, and Dropbox, which recently restructured itself to be more collaborative. All of them have integrations into Slack. So you're almost a Switzerland, if you will, of that brings a lot of these folks in. But I also wonder whether you think to yourself, if Google decided to flip a switch on GChat in a different way, whether that would become a big competitive threat.
They did flip a switch, and the fact that you don't know that indicates how much of a competitive threat it is.
But not in the same way. It's a different product.
Yeah, no, look, they have a competitive product as well, and no one knows about it. So I think here's how we look at it: competitor aware, customer obsessed. If we're right that there are a couple 100 million people who are going to switch to this kind of model, there's all different kinds of businesses. We have 95,000 customers, and so some of them are big multinationals, 100,000 plus daily active users on Slack. Some of them are 3-person, 5-person startups. Some of them are like a 50-person hotel chain. But there's dentists and tax preparers and government workers and a huge variety of people using Slack. And trying to find out the way to bring this model to different markets, different functional areas, different geographies is the focus.
For you right now, what's the biggest challenge with the business?
Biggest challenge is the one I think that is fundamental to all businesses, and this is super convenient for me because I think it's something that Slack really helps with, which is achieving a kind of alignment and clarity around roles and objectives so that we can move fast enough. We have 1,700 employees. The bigger you get, the harder it is to coordinate that activity and to really stay focused on the top priorities. I think the transparency and the alignment that comes when companies start using Slack is really helpful in achieving that.
This Switzerland idea is very attractive, but I also imagine that you have been attractive as a potential target, acquiring target, that is, from some of the big guys, the Microsofts of the world, the Salesforces of the world, the Googles of the world.
Yep.
You do have a dual class structure. So you can protect yourself in that way if you don't want to do a deal.
Yep.
But what's the thought process around being independent right now?
Well, we just see an enormous opportunity. I mean, so there's me, my preference. My preference is to do this alone. It's just such an enormous privilege, and I feel so lucky to have the shot to do it. Very few people will ever get that. I am a fiduciary to our shareholders, and I have a responsibility to our employees. So it's not the Stuart Butterfield show. I'm not wildly irresponsible. But we have relationships with all those companies. We have great partnerships with AWS, with Azure inside of Microsoft, with Google. We've done a huge amount of work together with Salesforce. And it's not like being a public company where they can just write a tender offer and they'll say, we'll give you this much per share. All the conversations are very tentative, and we've been super clear year after year in a very consistent way that we're just not interested.
Right. Let me ask you separately, this may be a broader topic. You said to the Financial Times 2 years ago, it's a strange world. If it was 10 years ago, meaning a decade ago,
yep,
we'd be public by now. So many of these Silicon Valley unicorns like yourself have stayed private for so long.
Yeah.
Was that the right decision? Do you think that was a mistake? Some people look at, by the way, the Uber and potentially the Lyft IPO as, had they gone public 2 years ago, maybe it would have been different. Maybe there would have been a greater growth opportunity.
Yeah. I think one thing we were very clear about was never trying to time the IPO, trying to time a listing event. We believe in our hearts that Benjamin Graham, short-term, the markets are a voting machine, long-term, they're a weighing machine. It can take time for people to figure it out and to wrap their heads around a business, but I would love to have this job for the next 20 or 25 years, so hopefully the investment community will have me, and that's the time period where we're looking to establish what we can do.
Okay, so for those who don't use Slack, by the way, we should just say,
yes,
and we showed us having a conversation over Slack earlier, this is, at least the goal, I think, is to end the world of email as we know it. When will we end the world of email as we know it?
Well, so as we know it inside of our companies, I think that's happening faster and faster and faster. And over the next few years, but certainly over the next 5 to 7 years, we'll see a really rapid change. The broader world of email, I think, will stick around. But Slack inside of a company, when you have a choice and you can have an inbox, which is just very individually oriented, everyone has their own partial fragmented view, or communicate in what we call channels, where it's a lot more transparency, it's a lot more accessible, everyone sees the same thing, and when someone joins the company, rather than an empty inbox, they have this whole history to scroll through, everyone will choose this.
Do you think so? Because one of the other things I was going to ask you was about privacy,
Yep.
which is we've moved in a very different world where it used to be everything was open. And by the way, Slack is very much about being open. It's about being open with the whole group, everybody in your team, seeing everything. It's full-on transparency.
Yep.
Do you think we're moving away from that?
Well, I mean, so I shook nodded my head and said yes when you're saying that, but Slack affords all kind of flexibility around privacy. You can have workspaces that have only some of your team members on it. You can make channels private and public, and it takes a little time to negotiate, where conversations should happen, so they're maximum amount of accessibility. But I think Slack's a very flexible platform for that set of concerns, and companies operate in a totally different way. Some of them are regulated. Sometimes there's that actual Chinese wall. Some companies want to be run in a way that's maximally transparent, and we give them the flexibility.
You talked about, you said Chinese wall, and I was thinking China.
Yes.
Just internationally, in terms of the growth prospects, where do you think you can do a lot of business, or where do you think it's going to be a lot tougher?
Well, over half of our users already are international or outside the U.S. It's 35% of revenue, so a lot of those international users are employees of U.S. multinationals that have big operations outside. But I look at I look at Japan, where I've been 5 times in the last 18 months or something like that. We have an incredible business. It's our second biggest country, and it's just like on fire. We're concentrating a lot more on Europe right now. Long term, though, I mean, we do think this is a product that should be accessible to everyone in the world, any different size, every industry, every geography. So, like longer term, Latin America, Southeast Asia, all over the developing world, we're really excited about that.
And finally, we should just tell the story for those who don't know. You were running a video. This company was not supposed to be this company.
No.
You were trying to create a video game, and that's how Slack. How did this happen?
So I and 3 other co-founders started the company. We had a couple people in Vancouver, British Columbia, a couple people here in New York City, in San Francisco. And as the company grew, we built the system for internal communication, which we didn't really think about, and it wasn't deliberately designed.
This was to build a video game.
Yeah, So for internal communication inside the company while we were in the process of building the video game. But as we added employees, we had business operations, we had customer support, back-end server engineering, people who do like creative stuff, writing, animation, music. The degree of collaboration, so the end product didn't hit the market in the way that we hoped, let's say,
right.
But the process was fantastic, and we were so effective and efficient. And at one point we realized, hey, we're never going to work without a system like this again. The rest of the world could probably use this.
Right. We should say the reference price today is going to be $26. What's success at the end of today when you look at the final price? What's success for you today?
Success is there is a freely traded market for equity securities in Slack. I mean, really, it's going to open at something, it's going to close at something. Same thing will happen tomorrow. Same thing will happen on Monday. There's such a big opportunity that's got to be where our focus is. And it's been interesting, everyone's very excited, everyone across the company. And everyone, we unfurled the banner in front of NICE yesterday, and it was like a big moment, everyone's clapping. But I think that employees are on board with the idea that we can't watch the fluctuations. There's no point. There's so many factors that have nothing to do with us. The Fed rates and trade wars with China. Like this, the macro environment is a little hectic, and we got to stay focused on creating value for customers.
I hope you do, but I promise you, people inside Slack will be slacking each other about the stock price. You should get a special emoji for that.
Yeah.
Okay. Stuart Butterfield, thank you. Appreciate
Thank you.
it. Good luck today.
Thanks.